You're trespassing. I'm calling the cops. Imagine hearing that at 3 a.m., while standing on the porch of your own lake cabin. That's exactly what happened to me. The night was peaceful, the lake was calm, and I had just made a cup of hot coffee to enjoy under the stars. Then suddenly, headlights in the trees, a woman in a bathrobe, and a whole lot of yelling. Her name? Karen. Yep, HOA Karen. The kind of person who thinks the world revolves around her, that every property line belongs to her HOA, and that calling 911 is her version of sending a friendly message. I'd never seen someone more determined to ruin a quiet night. But before we dive deeper into the drama, let me back it up a bit. I had recently inherited my grandfather's old lake property, 300 acres of untouched nature, complete with forests, trails, a private dock, and a rustic log cabin that stood right beside Crystal Pine Lake. It was the kind of place you dream about retiring to. No noise. No traffic. Just loons calling in the distance and stars bright enough to light up the trees. And here's the thing, I didn't just own a cabin. I owned the land around it. All of it. 3 miles in every direction. But apparently, Karen didn't get the memo. She lived in a fancy gated community about a mile down the road, the kind of HOA where people measure your grass height and fine you for putting the wrong mailbox. She didn't know me. She didn't bother checking property lines. All she saw was a man, me, pulling into a long-forgotten gravel road in a pickup truck and ruining her peace. The first time I saw her, I had just finished unloading lumber for repairs. I was wearing muddy boots, carrying a toolbox, and whistling some old country tune. That's when I heard the honk. She was standing by the edge of my driveway in a spotless luxury SUV, wearing giant sunglasses and holding a clipboard like she was auditioning for a role in a suburban soap opera. "You can't park here," she snapped. I looked around. This is my driveway." "No, it's community property. This road belongs to the Lakeside HOA." I chuckled, thinking she was joking. "Ma'am, this road's been in my family since before that HOA even existed. My grandfather carved it himself in the 70s. You might want to check your records." She narrowed her eyes like I had personally insulted her family name. "I'm head of the HOA. And if you don't move your vehicle, we'll have it towed." At that point, I realized what I was dealing with, not a concerned neighbor, but a full-blown Karen with a taste for control. I decided to keep things civil. "Listen, I just came here to clean up the cabin and spend a few weeks off-grid. I'm not part of the HOA. You don't have any jurisdiction over this land." But she didn't care. She just muttered something under her breath and drove off. At the time, I thought maybe that would be the end of it. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Over the next few days, things started getting weirder. Someone placed "No trespassing" signs on my trees. There were orange cones set up by the lake entrance, my lake entrance. I'd wake up to find little paper notices taped to my windshield, citing made-up violations like unregistered lake activity or unauthorized dock use. I started documenting everything. Took photos. Talked to the county office. Pulled up old land surveys. And guess what? I was right. My property was 100% private. Not part of the HOA. Never had been. I even owned the old service road they used to access the lake. They had simply forgotten, or assumed no one would care. But Karen? She wasn't about to back down. One afternoon, she showed up again, this time with 2 men in polo shirts who claimed to be on the HOA enforcement team. I had just lit a campfire and was prepping dinner. "We need you to vacate the premises," one of them said. "We're issuing a formal violation." I laughed. "On what grounds?" Karen stepped forward with her signature glare. "You've disturbed the wildlife. You violated HOA lake guidelines. And you're camping without a permit. I'm not camping, I replied. I'm living here. Not anymore, she hissed. This area is under HOA protection. And I won't allow squatters on our lake. At that point, I'd had enough. I went inside, grabbed my grandfather's original land deed, and brought it outside. You see this? I said, flipping it open. Not only do I own this land, I own the road, the lake access, the docks, and everything around your precious HOA. If anyone's trespassing, it's you. Karen's eyes twitched. Her enforcement team suddenly looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. You're lying, she snapped. We'll see what the county sheriff says. I smiled. Please. Call him. And she did. Which brings us back to that night. 3 a.m., cold coffee in my hand. Karen stomping up the driveway with 2 deputies behind her and yelling like she just caught a criminal on her lawn. The irony? She had just made the worst mistake of her HOA career. Because now, the law was involved, and the truth about who really owned the land was about to shut her down for good. If you thought Karen's little HOA tantrum at 3 a.m. was the peak of her craziness, oh no. That was just the beginning. After that night, I figured she'd calm down. You know, maybe realize she overreacted, take a step back, and go about her gated life sipping wine and monitoring lawn lengths like every other HOA queen. But nope, instead, she launched a full-scale neighborhood war. Her first move? Petty paperwork warfare. I was working on fixing the back deck of the cabin, laying down new planks, when a white envelope appeared tucked into my screen door. It was labeled, Notice of Violation, Urgent. Inside was a letter on Lakeside HOA letterhead. It claimed I had violated community standards by constructing unapproved modifications and altering natural vegetation. She even included fuzzy photos from across the lake, as if her 200x zoom camera could somehow prove I was committing crimes against landscaping. Now, let me be clear, I was not part of the HOA. My land was never part of it, and I had the records to prove it. Still, she was trying to scare me using official-looking documents, hoping I'd fold under the pressure or maybe pack up and leave. I didn't. Instead, I took the letter straight to the county zoning office. The guy at the counter, Larry, older man with a cowboy hat and a strong southern accent, looked at the papers and burst out laughing. She's at it again, he said, shaking his head. You're not the first she's harassed. But this here? He held up my original deed with the county seal. This land's as private as it gets. No HOA, no city limits. She's got no authority here. Still, Karen kept pushing. Next, she called the Wildlife Protection Authority. She claimed I was endangering rare species by cutting trees and disrupting the nesting environment. I couldn't believe it. I hadn't even cut a single tree, I was just clearing brush and fixing an old dock. But when the inspector showed up, clipboard in hand, I welcomed him with fresh lemonade and gave him a full tour. After 10 minutes, he laughed. This is actually one of the cleanest properties I've inspected all month. Looks like you're restoring the area, not damaging it. He left with a thumbs up. I left with a renewed sense of confidence. Karen? Probably left with another vein popping out of her forehead. But then came the sneaky stuff. One morning, I woke up to the sound of a car engine. I peeked through the blinds and saw a black SUV parked near my gate. 2 men in safety vests were hammering private property, HOA access only signs into the ground, on my land. I stormed out. Hey! Who told you to do this? I shouted. One of them looked up, startled. We were just following the order. Said it was community land now. No, it isn't, I snapped. You're trespassing, and that's illegal. They apologized immediately and removed the signs. One of them admitted Karen had given them a sign directive. I took photos of everything, filed a report, and kept a copy for myself. She was starting to cross legal lines now, and I was done playing nice. So I called a local real estate attorney. He looked over the situation, reviewed the maps, deeds, and complaints, and gave me a piece of advice I'll never forget. You're holding the winning hand. She's bluffing with fake chips. If she keeps going, we'll go public, and we'll make sure she regrets it. Now I wasn't just defending myself. I was getting ready to fight back. But Karen? She wasn't slowing down either. A few days later, I stopped by the town's general store to grab supplies. As I walked through the aisles, I noticed people staring at me. Some were whispering. Others looked uncomfortable. I shrugged it off, until the cashier said, "Hey, did you really threaten to build a shopping center?" "What?" "Karen's been telling everyone you're planning to destroy the forest and put up a Walmart. Said you want to commercialize the lake." I nearly dropped my groceries. So that was her next strategy, turn the neighborhood against me. Spread lies, paint me as some greedy outsider looking to ruin nature. What she didn't know. I had zero interest in commercializing anything. My plan was simple: restore the old lodge, reopen the nature trails, and preserve the land the way my grandfather had wanted. But Karen's lies were starting to catch fire. The next HOA meeting turned into chaos. A neighbor I'd never met drove all the way to my cabin just to confront me. "Is it true? You're opening the lake to tourists?" I shook my head. "No, sir. I'm restoring a lodge for personal use. No hotels, no resorts, no public tours." He paused, nodded, and said, "You need to speak at the next board meeting. People are confused. She's turning the community against you." So I did. With my lawyer beside me, I presented everything: deeds, maps, county approvals, wildlife inspection reports, even photos of Karen's signs on my land. By the end of the meeting, most of the crowd was stunned. A few people even apologized. Karen, though? She sat in the corner, arms crossed, lips tight. She knew the tide was turning. But she wasn't done yet. And neither was I. Because just days later, she pulled the most outrageous stunt of all. She waited until 3 a.m., drove to my cabin again, and called 911. Her claim? That I was illegally camping on protected HOA property. She actually thought she could get me arrested for sleeping in a house I legally owned. That night? It changed everything. Because when the sheriff arrived and looked over the land records, Karen's entire fake empire began to crumble. And I was just getting started. I was half asleep when it happened. The sound of tires crunching gravel outside my lake cabin jolted me awake. I glanced at the clock, 3:04 a.m. A strange light flickered across the ceiling. I sat up, pulled back the curtain, and there they were. Flashing red and blue lights. 2 sheriff's patrol vehicles were parked at the edge of my property, and standing proudly in front of them was the unmistakable figure of Karen, in her pink bathrobe, waving her arms like she was directing a hostage situation. At first, I thought maybe there was an emergency. A fire? A break-in? But no, this was Karen's final act of desperation. Her last move on the chessboard. And she had just made a very bad mistake. I slipped on a hoodie, grabbed the folder that held all my documents, deed, maps, survey records, and walked outside. The night was still. The lake glowed silver under the moon. And Karen? She was in full-on rage mode. "There he is," she shouted as soon as she saw me. "That's him. That's the man who's been illegally camping on HOA land." The younger deputy looked unsure. The older one looked annoyed. "Ma'am," the senior officer said calmly, "we've been over this." Karen ignored him. "He's trespassing. He threatened me. He said he owns the whole county. Now I'll admit, I may have once jokingly said to someone that I own everything from here to the highway, which, by the way, wasn't far from the truth. But Karen? She was acting like I was some Bond villain plotting world domination. "Sir," the younger deputy approached me, professional and polite. "Mind showing us your property documents again?" "Of course," I said, opening the folder. "Here's the deed, county records, zoning approval, survey map, and proof this land was never, and will never be, part of the Lakeside HOA. The deputy skimmed through the documents, nodding. "Everything's in order." Karen was now visibly trembling with frustration. "This is a mistake. He's manipulating paperwork. That road is part of our emergency access route. He can't live here. He can't even have a fire pit without a community permit." The older deputy stepped in. "Karen, we checked the GIS maps before we came out here tonight. This land is privately owned. Has been for over 40 years. It's not HOA land. It's not community land. It's his land." She went quiet. For the first time since I met her, Karen had nothing to say. "You may want to think carefully," the deputy added, "about how many more times you misuse emergency services. If you keep calling 911 for property disputes, you could be charged for false reporting." Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face was a mix of anger and embarrassment. She glanced back at her car, then muttered, "I just wanted peace and order." "This isn't your kingdom, Karen," I said quietly. "It's my property. And now you've brought the law into it, on record." She turned and stormed back to her car without another word. As the deputies were leaving, the older one turned to me and said, "She's got a reputation. You handled this better than most. Let us know if she shows up again." "I will," I replied. Believe me, this was the last straw. But here's the kicker, that night, something in me snapped. Up to this point, I had been trying to stay civil. I ignored the signs, the fake letters, the trespassing, the lies. But after that 911 stunt, I realized it was time to turn the tables. The next morning, I sat down with my lawyer and explained everything. Every warning, every sign, every incident. And I asked a simple question. What can I do to shut her down, legally and permanently? He grinned. You've got options. Lots of them. Turns out, what Karen had done was far beyond just annoying. She had falsely impersonated an HOA officer, sent forged violation notices, trespassed on private land, interfered with legal access to private property, misused emergency services. Each of those could be taken up with the county, or even in civil court. But we didn't start there. No, we went public. I created a simple website with maps, legal documents, and a timeline of events. I titled it, Who Really Owns Crystal Pine, and made it accessible to anyone with a link. Then I shared it anonymously with local homeowners, people inside the HOA. And let me tell you, they were shocked. Turns out, Karen had been using my land for years as if it belonged to the HOA. Hosting community walks, promoting lakefront events, even trying to get approval for a playground, all without ever owning an inch of the property. The emails started flooding in. People were apologizing, thanking me for the clarity, and, best of all, turning against Karen. She told us the lake was HOA managed. We didn't know you actually owned the trails. She said the cabin was abandoned and dangerous. Then one bold neighbor sent me a message I'll never forget. You should come to the next board meeting. People need to hear from the real owner, not the wannabe dictator. So I did. With every document in hand, calm and confident, I stood in front of the HOA board, in the very same clubhouse Karen used to rule like a queen, and told my story. The forged signs. The 3 a.m. cop call. The threats. The lies. And at the end, I said one thing that made jaws drop. I could gate off the road to the lake tomorrow. I could ban HOA access entirely. But I won't, because I'm not here to cause problems. I'm here to protect what's mine. All I ask is respect and privacy. The room was silent. Then a woman clapped. Then another. Then half the room. Karen? She sat frozen. Her reign was falling apart. That night, the board held a vote. And for the first time in HOA history, Karen was removed from all leadership positions. She didn't say a word. She just got up and walked out. After the board meeting, word spread like wildfire. Within 48 hours, Karen went from the self-proclaimed queen of the Lakeside HOA to a disgraced nobody. Neighbors who used to smile and nod now avoided her completely. A few even took down the little neighborhood watch signs she had installed without permission. But I wasn't done. Because while Karen had been playing checkers, I was busy playing chess. You see, for years she had operated under a lie, using my land to boost her own authority. She used the lake trail as her own walking path, staged community lake days on my shoreline, and even tried to charge guests for HOA access to the dock that she didn't even own. So I made a decision. If she could abuse access, I could control it. Step 1, I installed signs, legal, official, and county stamped. Private property, no HOA access without written permission. Then I placed trail cameras throughout the edge of my land. Not for spying, just for documentation. If someone stepped onto my property illegally again, I'd have proof. Step 2, I had my lawyer send a formal cease and desist letter to Karen herself. It spelled out every offense: trespassing, false representation, slander, and misuse of emergency services. We didn't sue, not yet, but we made it crystal clear. Any future harassment will result in legal action, damages, and a formal restraining order. Step 3, I went one step further. I hosted a public open house weekend on my lakefront, completely legal, fully permitted, and open to any local who wanted to enjoy nature respectfully. I brought in a couple food trucks, set up a fire pit area, hired a folk band, and opened my newly renovated trails for guided walks. And guess what? Over 200 people showed up. Families from town. Retired couples. Even members of the HOA, all curious about the man Karen had painted as some villain. What they found instead was a quiet guy restoring his grandfather's dream, offering free grilled hot dogs, talking about conservation, and playing fetch with his golden retriever. That weekend changed everything. People started seeing me as the community member. The neighbor. The caretaker. Not the outsider. And Karen? She stayed locked in her house with the curtains drawn, stewing in the bitterness of her own lies. But the real twist came 2 weeks later. I was stacking firewood behind the cabin when a man pulled up in a golf cart. Late 50s, well-dressed, looked like a retired executive. "Mind if I come up?" he asked. "Sure," I said, wiping my hands. "I'm David. New head of the HOA. I just wanted to say, we're sorry. For everything. Karen misled a lot of people." I nodded. "Thanks. I appreciate that." He glanced at the view of the lake. "Your grandfather was a legend around here. Everyone used to talk about the stories he'd tell. I think he'd be proud of what you've done." I smiled. "I hope so." Then he said something that caught me completely off guard. "We'd like to ask your permission to officially partner with you. For the trails. Maybe organize seasonal cleanups. Educational walks. With your rules, of course." I paused. After everything I'd gone through, the lies, the threats, the 911 call, this was a surprising offer. But it felt right. So I said, let's talk about it. We shook hands. Just like that, peace was restored. But Karen? Well, she didn't take the peace treaty so well. In fact, she couldn't stand it. A month later, I heard through the grapevine that she had quietly put her house up for sale. Rumor was she couldn't handle being in a neighborhood where her power had disappeared. Her name faded from the HOA minutes. Her flyers stopped showing up. The binoculars, the clipboard, the threats, all gone. And one fall afternoon, as I was raking leaves near the cabin, I saw a moving truck drive past the lake road. Karen was in the front seat. She didn't look at me. Just kept her eyes straight ahead as the truck rolled toward the highway and out of town. I stood there quietly, sipping coffee, the same way I had months earlier when this war began. Only now, it was my lake, my land, my rules. Epilogue, legacy restored. Since then, things have only gotten better. The old lodge on the far side of the property? I restored it. Now it's a community retreat spot, available for small events, family camping weekends, and nature education for local schools. All by invitation only. The dock? Still mine. But sometimes I'll invite a few neighbors to fish off it. Especially the kids. One little guy named Max caught his first base there. I gave him a framed photo to remember it. The trail? It's now known as Walter's Path, named after my grandfather. There's a small sign carved into oak at the entrance. Simple. Peaceful. Meaningful. As for the HOA? We coexist. They keep their lawns trimmed, they wave when I drive by, and they haven't called the police on me once. Progress. But every now and then, when the moon is high and the lake is quiet, I'll sit on the porch and remember that insane night, 3 a.m., flashing lights, Karen yelling about land she never owned. And I'll smile. Because in the end, the truth stood taller than any clipboard or HOA rulebook. And I didn't just protect my land.